Okay, so today we are going to go over chapters 19 and 20. And chapters 19 and 20 go and start with the introduction to sales and leases. Some of the material is going to seem like common sense, and that's okay. Some of the material is going to sound familiar, and that's okay because a lot of it is things you've dealt with in real life. Now, this is just from a legal standpoint. So, when we talk about sales, what are we talking about exactly? We're talking about fundamentally, it is goods, right? It is an exchange of stuff from one person to the other. When we talk about goods, we're talking about personal property. We're talking about that notebook, the pens, the chairs, furniture, and whatnot. And when we talk about a sale of a particular item, we're talking about those tangible goods transferring ownership from one person to the other. And the article, there's a particular section in the UCC Uniform Commercial Code that talks about or guides people as to the section of law that's applicable when we talk about goods or the transfer of those goods. So whenever I use the word goods, it just means movable, tangible property. When I talk about sale, it's that transferring of ownership from one person to the other. And again, kind of common sense, right? Because if I'm selling you my pen, I'm giving you my pen. So I'm no longer in possession of my pen. You're getting it. And in return, I'm getting money. When we talk about leases, however, we're when we talk about a lease, we're no longer talking about the transfer of ownership of something, but it's more of the possession of this particular item for a particular period of time. And you've all heard the term sale and you've all heard the term lease. The most common thing, you've heard of people leasing cars, right? If you're leasing a car, what does that mean? It means you are using that car for a certain period of time. And at the end of that duration of time, you're going to give that car back. You don't actually own it, but you do have permission to use it. And in return for that use, you're paying some kind of monthly obligation. I think now there's people that lease books, textbooks. There's people that lease clothes. If you think about, society today, I mean, I don't pre-COVID, because I don't know with COVID that might have changed a lot of things, but I remember these websites where you could rent, right? You're leasing dresses, fancy dresses, and you could borrow, utilize a dress for a certain period of time, and then you give that back. And so that's a lease, essentially, right? It's not a transfer of goods, it's possession of those goods for a particular period of time. So that's when we talk about sales and leases, that's really what we mean. And again, Article 2 governs the sale of transactions. It's generally, that's the section of the law that governs, unless a particular state decides that they don't want to use that, and then they'll kind of go something else. Article 2 does not cover, it covers the sale of goods, but there are some things that it doesn't cover. It doesn't cover insurance. It doesn't cover service or employment contract. It doesn't cover intangible pieces of property. Now you know what intangible pieces of property are. So it doesn't cover, stocks, bonds, patents, and copyrights. It's personal property. It's stuff that you can hold on to and sell, exchange ownership from that one person to the other. When we also talk about the exchange of goods, we're also talking about that contract. And that's why this section of the material comes after contracts, right? Because when you're selling or when you're leasing, generally speaking, you're what? You have some kind of contract, you have some kind of agreement between the two parties that allows you to make that transfer. Let me see here, what else? The fundamental principles of these sections of the law, principles of Article 2 and Article 2A. There's a couple of different things. Legal principles. Again, this is all listening stuff, but you could write it down because actually one of the terms is it's used all the time in the law, and that's the concept of good faith. Good faith is this legal concept that says it's when two parties enter into a contract where they want to achieve certain goals. Remember what I told you about contracts before? People enter into people enter into contracts because they want to get something. It's usually a mutually beneficial agreement or relationship between two entities. You don't want to get into a contract with somebody to try to screw them. It's because you want to buy something from somebody. It's because you are looking to build that relationship or that business relationship that you have. So when you're dealing with somebody in good faith, it's because two parties want to enter into this relationship with one another, and they want to deal with each other in a fair way. So that's the good faith concept. When we talk about the next term, which is unconscionability, unconscionability is kind of like the opposite of good faith. So good faith is like two people are dealing fairly with one another. Great, wonderful. Unconscionability is when the terms of the contract are so egregious, so awful, so one-sided that it would be unfair for a court to enforce them. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, hey, professor, I thought people had the right to contract with one another as how they see fit. That is true. And the courts really try not to put in their, hold on one second. They try not to put in, Simon, can you go away? Because it's very loud for me. It's you, I'm going to have to just scoot over. Hold on one second. Okay. So conscionability is when it's so egregious that the courts can't, in good conscience, try to enforce this particular term, because it's like, why would anybody in their right mind agree to this? So unconscionability is the opposite of good faith. It's so bad that the courts will not enforce it. The next term is it's actually like a sub of unconscionability. There's two different ways of having unconscionability. It could be procedural or it could be substantive. So procedural unconscionability, it could be like the tiny font on the bottom where there's no way that anybody could read it. There's something with the actual language, used, maybe big words were used when you're dealing with like an immigrant or somebody who's not familiar with the English language. Substantial unconscionability is the actual essence of the terms or agreement of it. But again, that's just in general, that's just unconscionability. Um, when two merchants are dealing with one another, so it's two businesses dealing with one another, the court is less likely to intervene and question whether or not it's an unconscionable relationship, because merchants are held to a higher standard. Merchants deal with each other on a regular basis. Merchants are used to having multiple business transactions. And so the court's not going to substitute its judgment for a merchant. It's less likely, because those merchants are deemed to have some kind of special skill, and maybe they entered into what may be perceived as an unconscionable for a particular reason or whatnot. Let me see here. Okay. I think I when we talked about contracts, we talked about how, the recommendation is to have as many terms as possible, like written out. That way, there's no question if a contract is good, if it's valid. You want to have as much terms as possible actually written out. When we talk about sales, there's a concept of open price. And so if you're buying something, maybe you don't have the price of this particular item in there, and that contract may still be valid. And when that happens, there's a couple of different factors that the court will look into play. again, it's merchants dealing with one another. But if I'm buying just a pen from you, or a notebook, or an iPad, or an iPhone, or something like that, the price should definitely be set. But the most common way for an open price to actually exist and be okay in the terms of a contract is when you have, a again, merchants dealing with one another, and perhaps they're getting their supplies from a third party, a natural mineral, or supplier of fish. And I think the example I had given in my other class was, if you are a seafood restaurant and you need seafood for your restaurant, you hire this fishermen to get your fish, right? And you say, I'm going to pay you the market price. But let's say they go out and their job is to get fish, and they supply it to all the local area. If they go out and they only catch like 100 pounds of fish, they might put a specific price on it. Whereas if they go out and they, catch 500 pounds of fish, it may be a different price on it. And so a particular price may not be set at the time that you enter into a contract, because it's going to depend on supply and demand. And that's when we revert back to, again, the concept of good faith, because both sides are not going to want to screw each other. You're going to negotiate a price that's fair. Why? Because if you're the restaurant owner, you're still going to need this particular other person to get fish from. That's your supplier. And if you're the fisherman or the fisherwoman and you're getting all this fish, you still want to keep good relations with these restaurant owners, because what if they don't want to buy your fish? What if other people don't want to buy your fish? You're going to go out and have all this fish, and nobody's going to want to buy it, right? So the concept of good faith is kind of merges into the whole open price concept. So that's open price. The same thing sometimes happens with uh, certain other options that may be put into a contract. Again, maybe not every single detail is spoken about until it's time to actually now like make that delivery or make that purchase. Okay. I'm looking at my syllabus to see what else I have to tell you guys. Open price. Okay. How do you accept something? What's the manner of acceptance? Well, it's whatever you kind of put in their contract. If you are a fisher person, like the restaurant owner, and you're expecting a delivery of fish, you're going to expect it maybe early in the day. That way you can use it for your people. If you are a club owner of a, like a bar and club, and you're getting a delivery maybe at 9 o'clock in the morning, that's not ideal because you're not actually open at that time. Maybe your business environment dictates that you're opening at 10 o'clock at night. That's when you're operating business. The next thing here on your chapter that I want you to know is auction. Auction is when you've heard the term before, auction. If you are familiar with the website eBay, you know what auction. If you've ever watched Storage Wars, or if you've ever watched any of those shows on TV, you have an idea of what an auction is. A item will be particularly up for a bid, and several people, whoever's interested, can make an offer of what they're willing to pay for this particular item. Sometimes an auction will say that there's an item that has a reserve on it, which means that item is not going to sell for below that price. I've seen houses, real property on auctions, right? That happens. And so whoever the highest bidder is may be able to get that particular piece of property. So that's an auction. Don't remember if I've spoken about this before, but when we talk about contracts, also in the statute of frauds, anything that's worth, or you're going to be contracting over $500, it has to be in writing in order for it to be enforced. So the statute of frauds says anything over 500 must be in writing in order for it to be enforced. Oh, this is not important. This is not, let's see here. Okay, manner auction consideration. Okay. All right. That's enough for chapter 19. I'm going to move on to chapter 20, which is a little bit more detailed performance. Now, this is the stuff I want you to pay attention to. And again, when I tell you to write something down, write it down. So this is right now listening. So chapter 20 focuses on performance. And when we talk about performance, very simply put, the performance means when you do what you're supposed to do. So if you are the seller of a particular item, your job, if you are the seller, is to transfer and deliver the goods. This is something I want you to write down. So the basic obligation of the seller is to transfer and deliver the goods. Again, a write it down moment. The basic obligation of the seller is to transfer and deliver the goods. The basic obligation of the buyer is to pay for those goods. Again, one more time, this is a write it down moment. The obligation of the buyer is to pay for those goods. Now we go back to listening. Each side should not try to impede the other side from carrying on with their performance. So each side should just basically do what they need to do without trying to stop the other side. When we talk about tender, place of tender, or time of tender, that means when that item is actually being transferred. So if we talk about the time of tender, this is, I want you to know time of tender and place of tender. So the time of tender is a reasonable period of time when you're going to be getting your item delivered. So again, if we're going back to that fisherman example, maybe a reasonable period of time to deliver that, delivery of fish would be at 5 o'clock in the morning. Whereas 5 o'clock in the morning may not be a reasonable period of time for a club owner. A reasonable period of time would be to give you an open window for when that delivery is going to be taking place between 2 and 3 o'clock. An unreasonable period would be between 2:30 and 2:35, giving you a 5-minute window to make a delivery or to make that pickup. A 5-minute window is not sufficient. An hour could be. When we talk about place of tender, it's where the place of the delivery is going to be. If you're ordering something, you're expecting it to be shipped to the place that you requested. If you're going to pick up an item, maybe it's going to be from the store that you ordered from during normal business hours, not a dark alley in the middle of the night behind some building where there's no lights, right? So place of tender has to be a reasonable period where somebody's going to get their particular product. Everybody with me so far? Okay.
Yes.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for acknowledging my presence. So the next thing, and this is something I want you to know, is called the perfect tender rule. This is something I want you to know. I'm going to explain it first, and then you can write down what you need to write down. The perfect tender rule says that a seller has to give the buyer exactly what they ordered. I can't. So, Christopher, can you go with your brother? So when you order, and we're going to go with examples of like stuff that happens now, right? If you go to Amazon and you order 100 purple vases, and Amazon ships you and you receive 90 purple vases and 10 blue ones, what are you going to do?
Sorry, return them.
What are you going to return?
The blue ones, the ones I didn't
So you're going to
order.
return a portion of them. Brielle Rowe asked for a refund. What are you asking for a refund for? The entire amount?
If you accept part of it, no. You just get a refund on the defective bar, or you just return everything and you ask for a refund on everything.
I think you've been watching, right? Maybe you watched the other lecture. That's exactly spot on. See, that's it. So you actually have a couple of options, and it's common sense. Brielle said it, Amar said it. If you get a wrong delivery, right, you can either, number one, either reject the entire order. It's not exactly what you ordered, so you can return the entire order. You can accept the entire order, or you can keep some and return some. And when we return some and keep some, or return everything, you're going to get a refund for that portion. Most companies will say keep the wrong item if it's nominal, and we'll give you a refund, or we'll send you the corrected item. So, Amazon will tell you keep those 10 blue ones, we'll send you another 10 purple ones. Right? So the perfect tender rule says when you order something, you're expecting that you're going to get that exact same thing, but you do have 3 options. Again, this is something I want you to know. You can either reject the whole thing, accept the whole thing, or return some and accept some. The buyers, the people who are contracting, have the option to work it out. You, as the buyer, have to give the seller an opportunity to remedy the situation. So you got to give them some time to actually fix it, whether they're sending you the new item, whether they're going to refund you the money. They want to have a happy customer, right? So they're going to try to do what's right in order to make you happy. You also have a reasonable period of time to inspect the items, right? So you get your shipment. You can't wait 2 months and then open the box to see if it was, the correct item or the wrong item. You have a window for returning stuff, right? You can't. So you need to make sure, and I said this in my other class, so I'm going to say it again. I have this bad habit of ordering stuff online, right? Clothes usually. And then I get it, I look at it, I put it away. The problem is once I try it on and I'm like, oh, this doesn't look right, this doesn't fit, it's too late. I can't return it at that
Not
point.
only you, I
It's
have
right.
the same issue.
Same issues,
It's
right?
so bad.
It's so bad. So then I have all this stuff with the tag still on it, but I can't even wear it because it's whatever. So you must inspect your items in a reasonable period of time. That way, if there's a defect in those items, you can return it. Again, this is common sense stuff, right? But there's actually things in the law that spell these things out. This is the section on inspection. Rejection. Rejection is, again, you have a reasonable period of time to reject those items. You cannot order, I usually give like a food example. You can't order 100, cookies or whatever, eat 90 of them, and then complain, say they didn't taste good. You ordered and ate 90 out of the 100, right? So if there was a problem with it and you're now trying to get a refund on this 100, you ate 90 of them. So there has to be a reasonableness or a method to that madness. There's got to be a reason of what you're doing. Once you accept a particular item, you cannot then try to reject it and get a refund, right? You have to be able to realize that there's a time period, a reasonable period of time for you to accept, for you to reject, for you to inspect. And every business has a reasonable period of time that they actually will write down for you. Where is that usually written? On the back of the receipt, right? Some stores will say this is a final sale item. You're not going to be able to return it no matter what. Some stores will give you 30 days. Some stores will give you 60 days. So depending on which store it is will dictate how much time that you actually have. Excuse me. The obligation of payment and is usually determined and set forth in the contract. How are you going to pay? What's the method of payment? Is it going to be a monthly payment? Are you going to, make payment before? Are you going to make payment half before and then half upon receipt? Generally speaking, when you're buying something like a pen, a paper, whatever, you're paying and then you're going to receive the item. So that's why when you receive the item, you have a reasonable period of time to inspect it to make sure it's okay. What happens if on its way to you, there's some kind of catastrophe and you're not getting the item that you ordered online, whether it's that dress, whether it's that bag, whether it's that phone? There's usually insurance, right? And we spoke about this before. If the item is lost or damaged on its way to you, there's usually insurance that the seller pays for. So it's transit insurance or whatnot. So they're going to get their money back. And you're not going to be obligated to pay for an item that you actually didn't receive. So the idea of loss of goods or things of that sort is usually covered by insurance. I do want to actually give you the secret phrase for today before I forget. So let's see here. So for today, I'm going to use the same phrase I did for last Wednesday's class, April 12th. Same. Okay. The secret phrase is, this year is looking hopeful and brighter as compared to last year. The secret phrase to get attendance credit for tonight's lecture, this year is looking hopeful and brighter as compared to last year. So that will be your phrase for the evening. So make sure, I don't know how many you have now, but you guys should be getting close to that 9 mark probably. Okay.
This is number 6, actually.
Okay, excellent. So you only have 3 more classes and then you guys can submit. Once you have your 9, just email them to me. You don't have to wait until the end of the semester. As a matter of fact, I prefer that once you actually have them, you send them to me, because then I can just input that part of your grade in there. So let's move on. Okay, non-happening of a presupposed condition. You enter into a contract to buy something, but something was supposed to happen, but it didn't. And as a result, now you can't have your particular item. So the non-happening of you assumed, right? Let's say if you ordered stuff, or you were supposed to have an event or some sort, but you didn't account for a global pandemic to take place, right? Nobody did. And you are making an order of some particular item that was supposed to come from overseas, and it didn't because there was a whole bunch of delays in shipment. Well, that was a non-happening of an event that you assumed would happen. You assumed that there'd be transportation and you would get your item in a particular reasonably period of time. You assumed that you were going to be able to get married or have that graduation party at a place of a facility, but because of the global pandemic, you are not. So sometimes there are conditions that are, or events that are beyond our control. And so that gives an out for both parties to renegotiate based on the current conditions, something else that can be done in order for them to remedy that situation. Okay. The next thing is something called anticipatory repudiation. And anticipatory repudiation it's a legal theory or a legal concept that allows you to back out of a contract when you know the other side is not going to be able to perform their end of the agreement. So whether you know that they're not going to be able to perform through words or conduct, you can stop performing your end because you know the other side is not going to go through with it. So that's called anticipatory. You're anticipating the other side to repudiate, to take back, or to not perform their end of the deal. Okay, let's see here. Huh. Oh.
Case.
I'm sorry?
Now we have the case.
Yeah, I was just looking at the syllabus to see what's next. And now we have this case. So this case, I usually do not test on. It's not that complicated, but you know, it's a case. It's in your textbook. So
it's just so complicated in the middle.
Yeah. Give me, if anybody read it and you want to just give me generally what you think happened, I'll take that.
I can.
Okay, go ahead, Amar.
So there is a new car that's coming out, and then there's a dealership that they said that it's a promotional car, and then the first customer came, he bought a down payment of $5,000. They did not specify how much the car will be because the manufacturer still didn't set it up, and they agreed that he's going to be receiving it maximum at the end of the year, and they signed an agreement and he put the deposit on it. And then after a while, another person came, and then no, actually in a while after a while, they told the first person that this car price will be like $39,000. So he said, okay. After a while, another person came and he's selling, the dealer now, he's selling him this car for $50,000, and this person bought $10,000. So he kind of like preferred the second guy over the first guy, and he promised him he's gonna give him the car first, even that he has agreement with the first one. And then after he made the deal with the second guy, he told the first one that the Midwest is not going to receive this car. So for him, and he's going to send him the money back. But the first guy told him that he attended an event that for the manufacturer, and the representative there gave him a list of the dealership that's going to be getting this car, and this name is in between them. And so the dealership was like, you're putting me in troubles, and you know what, I'm not going to sell you this car. He kept going back and forth with them. And then at the end, he even went to the dealership and he saw the second person receiving the car. He saw the car in the dealership with the other guy receiving it. So he understood what's going on. And then he sued. And then the court even gave him $29,000 because technically the dealership had breached his contract. According to this, actually, anticipatory, I don't know.
Anticipatory repudiation.
Yeah.
Exactly. Very good. Excellent job. You did a very, very good job with that.
I tried.
Excellent. No, that's very good. That's actually the last thing for tonight. So if anybody has any questions on any particular item we covered, you may feel free to ask now, or, hold your peace until the next time we meet. Again, do not forget, next week will not be a live lecture. I'm going to put a pre-recorded video that you can watch at your leisure. So next week, no live lecture. You'll just watch the lecture that I put up on YouTube, and then we'll reconvene the week after.
Yeah, I have about the case. Does it represent like an anticipatory repudiation because of the
does it
breach?
have what? I'm sorry, say it again.
The anticipatory repudiation, does it represent that, the case?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Anybody else? Any other questions? Okay, great. If you have any questions, generally speaking, you can always email me and I will get back to you when I have a chance.
Excuse me?
Yes, sir.
So, are you going to post the recording on your YouTube channel?
And I put it up on Blackboard. I put up the link on Blackboard like I do every week.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else?
Professor, one thing, when you put announcements, for some reason, I don't get a notification or email about it, but I get that for my other classes.
I know you mentioned this before, but all the other, like I think we had a good night, Bastian. Other kids get it, so I don't know if it's something with your settings, but I remember you brought this up in the beginning of the semester and other students said that they receive it. I don't have control over it. I make it so it sends an announcement. I also get a copy of the email when it's sent. It's not sent right away. I usually get the email that something was posted like a day or two after I actually post it.
Like that day I came from work, and then because I don't get notifications, so every like almost 2-3 hours I check Blackboard